I'll hand it over to Sandra and B. So can everyone see my the PowerPoint here?
Yeah, you're good.
Great. All right. So feel free to go ahead. Sorry, that wasn't clear.
We can start?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So Hati, Denise, Skyzet, Sakuzet, Saisozi, Sakuzet, Weestes, Nito Uzi, Sandra Martin Harris, no Tanis yet. Honest day, no Tanis yet, which means I'm really good to be here. I'm practicing my language whenever I can. I'm not a speaker and I'm learning key words here and there. And so I'm practicing using them. So I kind of stumble along. So please bear with me as I do this. And I'm really pleased to have you here with us. And we're in the implementation and change workshop. And Beatrice Anthony is with me here and from Eskedem. And I'm calling in from the Gitsan Lakiep, the small community of Hegogit in northwestern BC. And I'm from the Wet'suwet'en Nation. I'm from the Small Frog Clan. And I'm from the Ganehlia, the House of Many Eyes. And I've been a community planner for as long as I can remember. I'm doing watershed planning, health planning, social planning, language planning, job and readiness planning. Everywhere we turn around, it seems like we have planning. And then what happens when we do all that good work? When we take the time to listen to our people, we get all these brilliant ideas, and then what happens? And so that's a bit about what we're going to share about today. So welcome to our session. And the next slide. And so we like to start off with something called here's our intro. Sorry, our intro. That's my welcoming. And we do something called the Yinta Nod. And the Yinta is the territory, the homelands of our people. And we always want to acknowledge the land. I'm here on the Lakip of the Gitsan because the land provides life. And life and land are sacred. And so the land provides so much for us every single day. Every moment of the day provides air, oxygen, hopefully sunshine, water, food, all these things that sustain us, that give us life. Sometimes ancestors are close by. Some people know the creator is here too. And so we always want to take the time to acknowledge the land, the Yinta. And today in our session, Beatrice and I will be going over this thing called a collective agreement. How will we be together in this space, in the spiritual space? And then sharing a little bit about our Indigenous ways, how we are in a collective, and how that's so dynamic and hopefully fun too, and learning and sharing our ways. And this idea of action, implementation, and change. And change, if we look at from a lens, from an Indigenous lens, comes from a place of transformation and adaptation, which is very strong teaching or ways of our people. And then the sharing and holding each other up as we go along in this work. And here is a visual agenda. I'm practicing my graphic facilitation. I don't do that well with actual facilitation, but I love to make visual agendas. And so this is a visual agenda. And almost all the time I use the spiral. It's a very sacred symbol. And it's around this idea of taking deeper dives. The more we do this work, we get deeper and deeper. Linking more and more into our ways. All right. Next slide. So here is a sample of a collective agreement. Lots of times we would do this in our own language, and the teachings coming forward about how we're going to be respectful to each other in a space, in a community meeting, online, and collectively we agree to this. So wakos, being in good relations or respectful. We want to be kind and compassionate. We're all in our own different place in the world, in our journey. It's okay to laugh and share, but not at others. We come from this speaking at one time, that we be lean, and to give each other a chance to have a voice, and to acknowledge again that the Yinta, the land, is here, and that Sedetni, our ancestors, are here, so we're not alone. And sometimes when we feel overwhelmed or like it's too much, we kind of withdraw and we get into that isolated place. So it's important to just sit up and look around and acknowledge and see what else might be there to help us through those times. And also this idea of microaggressions. I do a lot of trauma and lateral violence work, and microaggressions is no snapping eyes, no big sighs, because we can use our body language to assert over one another. And so we want to create a trusting place, a safe place, and that everybody's all right to share. And even if we don't like what they say we can listen. And everyone has an opinion, and everybody matters. And that's it, the philosophy behind the circle as well. Okay. And so we have generally, as you've seen this morning, we have 4 big steps for planning, pre-planning on the far right side, getting ready to plan, or community readiness. And every community is different in what this looks like. So the idea is just to see where you're at right now. Building inclusivity, building a sense of belonging, recognizing our strengths. How do people want to be involved? Reaching out to all ages and all genders. And then we move into the actual planning where we talk to our people. And the most important thing is to listen to what they say and reflect that back. Did we get it right? Is there more? And then into the implementation piece on where the circle is there. And building up this collective shared vision. And that's, to me, the most important aspect of this work. Is it's not just leadership, it's not just people, it's not service oriented or service driven, it's a collective. You are a collective. So it's a number of families, could be a number of communities, and one as a nation. Each community has their uniqueness and their strengths. And how can we lift those up and build on the successes we have? And so that's where we're at. Messiah. And then when we go through this work, we talk about transformation and change. And Gwen Phillips from the Kanaha Nation says that, as soon as we start planning, things are going to change. And we're going to implement steps, adapt and change and transform as we go. And the idea of a trickster is a very strong teaching amongst our people and our Indigenous ways of being, knowing, and doing. The trickster, and I have not yet met one nation that does not have a trickster. We all have a trickster. And this trickster has lots of stories, teachings, warnings. Sometimes they give us a warning. And this trickster helps us remember that we transform, we change, we adapt. And that's been a part of our ways, I'd say, since time immemorial. And that's how we've come to survive. That's how we've come to be so resilient, because we've had this ability and we have these stories. And now it's coming into wintertime, and the story time is coming to life in our communities and our homes, to share the stories that make us laugh, that help us be silly. And they help us remember how it is that we changed, how we transformed to get through trouble. Whether we're in Mi'kmaq or down in Secwepemc or Wet'suwet'en or in Quebec, and that these teachers help us. They help us move through. It's like a river. We just keep moving through what we need to move through. And so this is a story here in my culture, in Wet'suwet'en culture. We have Estace, the big man, is our trickster. He gives us creation stories. He gives us stories of behavior, and what if we do something, what are the consequences of those actions? And in the Gitxsan here, they have Dakyet, oh, I'm not saying that right. They have the raven, and many places in BC have the raven as a trickster. And this is, I'm going to hand it over to B, and she's going to share a story of the coyote in her area. Miss I.
Hello. Yes, coyote, the stories of the Sapakun. Skelep is a coyote. He was a helper to the people. He could transform into anything he wanted. He used his transformation to help and to trick people. Coyote often used himself as an example to behave properly and to recognize certain values. Next slide. Nope. You're welcome. So must be missing a slide there. Huayca Beatrice Anthony Resquest, Latin Swenwin. Good morning, everybody. I'm here to present on community plan implementation from Musketamgulu. Strong, resilient, forward-thinking community, strong in culture, community values, and connection to the land, incorporating ways of being and knowing. So let me share a story of Skelep. This is a story about coyote and salmon fishing. So like Trickster, you can become a transformer too. The story of Skelep incorporates contemporary spin on plan implementation. So let's begin. A long time ago, Coyote was designated the project champion lead to implement a plan to catch salmon. Being mindful of the community vision of food sustainability, Skelep sets out to go catch salmon, and he starts to feel defeated and insulted. And after several repeated attempts and failures to catch a salmon, Skelep seeks console and advice in the Old One and how to catch the salmon. The Old One provides Skelep with training and professional support and utilizing knowledge and resources for resource management and incorporating his skills and utilizing tools to implement a plan to catch a salmon. Skelep enjoys the success for a while, and once again, he begins to fail. Skelep stops and he rethinks his implementation strategy and seeks further console in the Old One. Skelep learns the integral aspects of salmon fishing techniques, of using a spear in the shallow running rivers, or a dip net where the waters are calm and still, or the set net where the waters are rapid and swift, or using a gill net when he wants to do leisurely fishing at weeks at a time. Skelep also learns the skill of salmon food preparation, how to dry, how to can, how to freeze the salmon to preserve and store food for the winter. Skelep receives further instruction to conduct further research and review on specific fishing locations and the best time of the year for fishing, with instruction to bring back his teachings to the people to reinforce food sustainability and best practices. The story concludes with Skelep understanding how to catch salmon after being exhausted after numerous failed attempts. Skelep recognizes the importance of plan implementation and utilizing and access and training to build skills, abilities with the use of resources and tools to implement salmon fishing techniques for success. So the moral of the story is, don't give up with project initiative planning and implementation. Try again to build your strength, your skills and abilities to become resilient. So this is an incorporation of sharing our oral tradition and teachings for community practices that are shared through wisdom and stories that have been learned and lived and passed down through generations. Next slide. So working to transform into work planning. Let me start with the graphic art that was shared at Seabird Island in 2019 with the Chilcotin. they found that community planning wasn't working in the confines of their offices or in the buildings with inviting community members in to discuss community planning. This wasn't working for them. So they decided to, oh, excuse me, I gotta turn my sound up there. They decided to go back out on the land to incorporate community planning, incorporating language and culture, using the seasonal rounds of spring, summer, winter, and fall, and reconnecting the elders with the youth, incorporating traditional practices, sharing knowledge and stories, and coming together as a community to celebrate their success at the end of the year through feast and celebration. So it's important to know your community plan of your short-term and your long-term goals and the vision of your community to be able to implement work planning, knowing what your community priorities are and what is needed now, what can be done through program collaboration, and setting the direction to meet the needs of project activities, incorporating history, cultural, traditional, and economic practices to govern and preserve and protect and promote community well-being under the guidance of membership and direction of leadership to work with administration, finance, who in turn oversee and support management with annual work plan budgets, highlighting key priorities that are in line with the community vision statement that support and promote community sustainability and to build capacity through action plan implementation of ongoing project initiatives that are endorsed by community leadership. So the importance of knowing the stories around the campfires of community vision and the key community priorities. There's often gatherings around campsites where stories are shared by family members, and they often discuss community needs. So knowing those stories shared around the campfires of the community priorities of what needs attention now, what can be shared and done with the combined resources that you have in the community through the work plans, the programs, project initiatives, through partnership agreements, or working with any affiliated agencies or municipalities and ministries when incorporating funding proposals to be submitted to achieve measurable results and achieving successful outcomes in line with the funding criteria and the guidelines and the reporting requirements. So also through plan implementation, you're building your team up through the designated project champion lead who will oversee, organize, and manage the team project design plan with assessment of the skills within the community and incorporating any training requirements when needed. Or you could hire or bring in professionals to support project initiatives that are very complex and technical in nature, incorporating mentorship, training, and employment opportunities for large-scale projects or agreements that you may be negotiating for benefit agreements to bring back benefits for the communities to support some programs like the elders, the youth, recreation, or cultural, some of the programs that lack in funding or they have very minimal funding. And being sure to provide annual progress reports and reporting back to the community and identifying your projects and your budgets. You could start with reviewing and reflecting on what is needed first in the short term, 6 months, 1 to 5 years, or 10 years. You could start with quick start projects, for instance, like, for community signage, or doing your street names, incorporating your language, or hiring a communications coordinator or elders or youth coordinator. So starting with the development of a community garden is another way to promote food sustainability. Some of these quick start projects show the initiative of you're picking up the plan and working with it with incorporating some of the key priorities identified within your community plan. And with long-term projects where you currently don't have the funding, you can establish a savings plan to plan to build the project in 5 or 10 years, putting aside funds. This will demonstrate your commitment to achieve the long-term projects and setting aside funds. So celebrating your success stories and sharing what's accomplished as we gather together in community to celebrate and reaffirm our commitment to the community and our values and priorities with recognition and respect and acknowledgement of the achieved targeted outcomes with recognition of those involved, highlighting success stories, trainings, skills acquirement, and shared inspiration stories of those who went back to school for higher education to acquire skills for any long-term project initiatives. Through community celebrations, it's essential to promote community planning, to promote community pride, encourage ongoing activities through active community participation in community planning. So the next slide, I'll hand it over to Sandra.
Yes, thank you, Bea. So yeah, so that's a lot of work doing all that stuff. So it's important to stop and you have a team there that you're going to be working with, hopefully somebody from leadership, from management, a youth or elder, and you know who the doers are in the community, and they naturally come forward, the natural leaders in your nation or your community. And so we want to really bring them up and lift them up in this process. Like Bea said, if they need training, there's always this idea of collaboration or working together. And that's really the paradigm shift that we're wanting to see in our homelands, is this collaboration of all agencies working together. As you listen to your people, that'll likely be one of the top things they'll ask for is seamless service. And they don't want to run around to 5 or 10 different agencies to get one need met, to get bounced around. And so that takes a lot of consensus building, and that takes a lot of integration of many different people coming together. And that is the most difficult thing to do in our communities. We're so busy with our own projects within education or jobs and readiness or economic development that we don't necessarily have the time to work together. But any nation or any community that's been able to succeed is because they've been able to do that. Sometimes it's strong leadership hauling people along, but when that leader goes, then everything falls down. So it's really important. I can't emphasize that enough. And hopefully that coming together and working together will be there right from day one. And so we keep coming back to this holistic approach that everyone matters, that no one's left behind, because we come from this idea that connection is medicine. And we've seen through trauma, through the intergenerational trauma, the big collective trauma that we're seeing across Turtle Island now, that when there's a lot of stress, it turns into toxic stress. And then we get into, and that can beat us in a place of disconnection. And so when that starts to happen, we start to lose our people. So it's so important that we connect. Connection is medicine. That's what I'm talking about. And that connection, the more connection we have in our lives, the more resilience we see, we feel, we notice, and how we can hold each other up. And that really comes from this place of strength. You know, our people are incredibly tough. We're tough people. We're strong because we have lived through so much. Our ancestors have lived through so much. And so we want to recognize those amazing strengths, those values of community, of land, of language, our kinship system, the humor that comes along with that, because wherever you find our people, there will always be laughter and humor. And the humility. And these are the values and ways of our people that help us grow, help us get through trouble, help us go down a good path so we all have a good life. And that's the good thinking, the reflecting that we need everywhere, because there's not enough of us in the world. We need every single one of us to survive and live a good life. And I think of Dr. Manley Begay and the governance work he shares working with First Nations. We want everyone to live to 100 years old and have a good life and be an elder and give back to the young people, to the children. And it's the children's well-being. That's why we do all of this. So the children are connected to who they are. They know where they fit, where they belong. They're embraced and loved. And I think of Dr. Robert Joseph from the Truth of Reconciliation Commission in BC here. And he says, our communities are sacred places because this is where our children live. And that's such a profound thing to say, because that's not how I grew up. And so helping me go through that understanding and that knowing that every child matters. We can get through the racism. We can get through the lateral violence and the meanness. We can recognize the strengths of our people collectively, then we can move forward. Or we can find ways to lift each other up and hold each other up through ceremony, the strengths of our people, our songs, the drum, which is so powerful. Yeah. And then we have change, or we adapt and move forward in the way that we want to move forward, just as we have always done. All right, the next slide. Yeah, so this is the doing part, the Indigenous ways of doing. And we line up ourselves according to our cultural practices and beliefs and values. So this idea of relationships, all these relationships are important. Understanding our roles and responsibilities, honoring the natural leaders in our families, that we come together, we have tea together, we talk, we're on the phone, that we have a place for everyone, all ages and all genders. All genders is important because many of our people have suffered discrimination because they're not either male or female. And so we want to make room for everyone. We want to hold up our elders. They're like our ethics board. When Granny comes along and taps you on the shoulder, you're like, uh-oh. Granny is like our ethics board, our grandparents. They tell us when we're not following a good path. And it's so important that we listen. Sometimes we don't want to, but that's really important. Those connections, those relations are important. Yeah, so art, I've got different art shared in this from Michelle Stoney. She's a Gitsan artist. Art is such a good healer. It helps us move through that stuck place when it feels big and overwhelming. If we focus on something in our hands, that helps us move through our stuckness. And actually opens up neural pathways in our brain. So we get out of that groove, like I was talking about this morning with squirrel running around in there. And we kind of get in a groove in our brain. And that actually happens I'm going to date myself here, like a record player. It skips and it stays in that groove. And we've had a lot of stress in our lives. We get in that groove. And so things like coloring or art or painting, carving, drumming, singing, beading, going on the land and getting medicines, making tea for grandma, cooking breakfast for a little one, or the community. These are all things that help us move through our stuckness when it feels overwhelming. And so that's an awareness. So that's so important. And we see that all over the place are people doing this. That's the doing, that's the action. And that's the transformation. Okay. So I just love the work that's been going on in Pekanjigum. I think it's Saskatchewan. They have an amazing health plan there. They've done a lot of community work there. They're a big community. It's gone through some really terrible times. And they're working through many things, trying to help get on their path. And so, people that have done this planning, we witness what they're doing and we hold them up and we check in with them. We ask questions like, how did you do this? How did you do that? And so that's the beauty of this kind of work, is how we hold each other up in this, because every community matters. when one community falls down, we all come together to help lift them up, like we do with the Mi'kmaq, as we do in Quebec. And that's why I love this work. Northern Ontario, thank you. That's why we do this work, because we know how oppression works. We're wise. We know how oppression works. And if we come back to our own ways of helping each other up, so we all succeed, the sooner the better, then more of us will have a good life. Nobody is lost or left behind. So these are some of the things they've shared in their plan, to have a community feast or celebration. Celebrate. It's so important. We don't do enough of that. You know, we have so much of that critical voice in our communities. It's so important that we take the time to celebrate and lift each other up. And it feels awkward because we're not used to doing it. And in some ways, that's against a bit of our humility piece. There's nothing wrong with recognizing good work. That's important. Our young people need to see that, so they come home and they're recognized for the work they do, linking them up to our wise ones. So we can have a band council endorsement or a leadership endorsement, whatever leadership you have. We have usually a young CCP coordinator. Yeah, we have protocols, we have staff training. These are some of the ideas. Having a booth at community functions, you know, there's planning. This is what your people said, and this is what we're doing collectively. And to start small and scale up as you go, much like this tree. Start small and grow big. All right. Next slide. Oops, I'm looking at my screen wondering why it didn't move on my computer. Wise practices that we've learned and shared over the years. You know, one of the most important things is to listen to our people. And sometimes, because we're not used to coming together and sharing the power, sharing the decision making, often the first time we do that, or the first little while, is we get a lot of critical voices. And so we have to sit beside that critical voice and not pick it up. And listen and witness our people. And that's another very strong Indigenous way, is to witness people. You know, housing, there's not enough housing. How do you make decisions when there's not enough? And to share information, to take the data that we're learning about our people and sharing it, because our people are so wise. Yeah. So we have, again, this integrated services. We have people working together, our staff leadership in all ages, especially with our youth, that we reflect, we do something and we reflect. How did it go? Was there challenges? Is there something we could do different next time? And that's a continuous improvement cycle. And that's so important that we have that reflection piece, or the debriefing piece, that we honor our language and culture, our traditional practices. We have room for all of it. It's not just economic development and not language and culture. It's language and culture and sustainable development. You make room for all of it. And that the shift to get to systems working for our people, so that they're strong, they're healthy, and they meet the needs of our people. And this is what we call synergy. This is what sorry, I got another call coming in here. This is the deep dives. As we do something and we learn and it gets better, we can do something bigger. And that's to learn and grow as we go. Yeah, again, I'm going to keep saying this, you're not alone. The land, the Yinta is there, our ancestors, the creator. These are all medicine for us that help us get through hard times, especially like now with the pandemic. Okay.
Thanks, Sandra. So that's an overview on plan implementation. Excuse me. The CCP handbook is a great resource tool and link for tools and resources in the community handbook. It's listed on the web line. The web link is there. And there's a number of supporting links for First Nation project initiatives in economic development, in housing and health, in education, in social and governance. So just simply Google searching any initiative that you're interested in incorporating within your community, utilizing in the northern region, utilizing New Relationship Trust that supports initiatives in 5 key areas of governance, capacity building, economic development, language and culture, education, and youth and elder activities. And the Northern Development Initiative Trust Funds, that is a focus within the northern regions with investment in economic development. And the First Nations Health Authority, they're renewing their 5-year plan with focus on health planning and capital planning. The First Nations Health and Wellness Planning Toolkit, it's accessible to BC First Nations to use and access to support community health and wellness initiatives. So in closing, putting your action plan to work through plan implementation and having identified your key priorities and your collective vision statement. Posting your vision statement throughout your community, on your website, in your newsletter, through email signatures and online signatures, and knowing your CCP and celebrating your successes through support community-based services and any collective agreements. Through management implementation with annual work plans, budget presentations, planning, and reports. These could be quarterly and annual reports with regular update to community members. Through project management team, they oversee and organize and provide reports on plan implementation with the set priority areas with focus on quick start projects. And do regular check-ins and debriefing and reflecting on your project initiative, and be mindful to share your success stories and any challenges. So that concludes our presentation. I don't know, Sandra, if you wanted to do that toll or that poll question, or
Yeah.
if it's not available.
I don't think too many people answered on there. That's okay, because it kind of means going off onto another internet site. So that's all right. I just typed in a question there about what kind of tips do you have to share around implementation in your community or successes? Yeah, because that's part of this learning and sharing is we learn from other nations, what other communities have done and what worked. Mm-hmm. And we can pick those up, adapt them, and use them in any way we can. Utabi Masai.
And
I could probably close the, yeah. Stay consistent. Never stop, because when you see the vision, it will develop. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Don't give up. That's right. Mm-hmm. And you know, I used to print off the vision posters and I'd plaster them everywhere. Once you have your community vision and even the top goals, you know, what are your priorities for this year, and put them everywhere and make sure every manager has them. They're in the newsletter, they're on the website. Some people even have them on the phone. When you phone into your community office, they would have, you know, we have a community plan. This is our vision. These are the 5 things we're working on this year. Call it a living document, because in reality, there will always be more ideas. Yes, absolutely, Diana. And, you know, things change, like we see this year with the pandemic virus showing up. That's really changed how we do business, hey? So we have to adapt. So we can't have community meetings right now. So what can we do? You know, we still need to, yeah, always in draft. We always need to sit back and reflect, you know. So we're not going to get to these 3 things this year. Maybe we can do one thing. And what is that one thing we can do? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does anybody have any projects that they would like to share?
Yes, I saw one community who had the goals actions posted in the front hall of the band office. It was the white beard version, and staff responsible updated notes beside each action so that the morning of the implementation or the monitoring of the implementation was very public. Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Don't think you have to figure it all out by yourself. Yes, absolutely. Hopefully you have a planning team there.
Yeah.
I like the idea of posting it up and sharing.
Yeah. Yeah. So even with COVID, you can still do your quick start projects like your community gardens and that. SCAT recently did community gardens and built garden boxes as well for the elders in the community and the low-income families. So still continuing to incorporate community priorities.
Yes, and some communities did like a community pantry. You know, they would harvest traditional foods and medicines, and they would create a community pantry to get through the month. You know, that we'd get the hunters and the trappers out, harvesting the different foods that are available seasonally and start building a pantry.
So ongoing funding available for implementation is through strategic planning initiatives, as well as looking at northern regional funds available around your regional areas to support project initiative implementation planning. So utilizing and accessing various funding agencies around there and building partnerships as well with affiliated agencies, and utilizing and accessing some of your program resources is another form of collaboration for plan implementation.
And there's also different versions of the planning handbook. I think there's two other versions. In Ontario has a version. I'm not sure if it's Manitoba or Saskatchewan that has another version of the handbook. So each region might have their own planning handbook, and it's really cool to see the differences and the similarities between them, how they express the planning according to the ways of their people of their region. It's pretty cool. So maybe we could share that too. It's not just the BC region handbook.
Yeah. So sharing your vision throughout, that's key, and messaging and communicating your vision statement so everybody understands and knows your community vision to be able to incorporate project plan implementation.
And then if you have like 3 areas of implementation, to report that back to the people. You know, we have food security, food sustainability issues. So we provided, 50 food boxes, or we created a community pantry. And now we're keeping track of how many homes are accessing this service or this program and reporting that back to the people. And those are indicators to keep track of. Does it go up or down? Is it not enough? Can we get more? Is it needed? And that's what they call indicators. And that's part of the monitoring and evaluation piece, but that's something we want to keep tabs on. Like, how well is it going? And does it need more or less? Do more people need to be involved? Yeah, that's the reflecting.
And having your community members across the nations. So yeah, I know that's a challenge, especially with communications and reaching out to your community members to be able to acquire their addresses and contact information. It's always been a challenge. So maybe utilizing Facebook or websites to initiate communications with off-reserve members and sharing a copy of your CCP on the website. with regular updates and just reconnecting with people off reserve and sharing your success stories, some of your success stories. It can be shared through video too. ASCET uses form of communications through video messaging, which highlights key stories that have been incorporated with the community and recognizing those that are involved and the success stories of their project implementation. So providing regular updates is key for communications.
Yeah, that's probably the hardest thing to do is to communicate back. Yeah. And I love the idea of video because our people are so oral. Hey, we like to have paper. I'm old school. I like to have paper, but I also like to hear things. Hey, and that's a really cool way to engage and report back. And then what's happening next? Yeah, there's lots of comments here on the chat. Reporting back to the community so they keep us accountable. Absolutely, that's a good governance practice. So happy to hear that. One community doesn't have an actual land base, so they've created hubs across Canada, across Turtle Island, and have community hubs and coordinators in each hub. Wow. Yeah, and so there's just so much good work happening. It's so good to see. Yeah, so don't give up. One step at a time. Yeah, that's what my dad used to say. Yeah, that's what my dad used to say. How do you eat an elephant? How do you get an elephant in a car? Yeah, one step at a time. You know, and that's like planning. Everything is one step at a time. And to stop and debrief with each other if you have a team there is really important. Because sometimes these things are not easy. And so some self-care in there is just as important as we walk together. And to keep our balance. And yeah, especially with this pandemic, we have lots of big things showing up like fear and worry and anxiety. So we really need to take care of those things because it's an energy and it can grow. So we want to help contain it. We've got to practice containing it and then find those pathways of action, the steps that we can do to help one another. Yeah, it's wonderful. So glad to see all the good work across our regions. Yeah.
Yeah, the challenge about sectoral plans, recognizing that too, departments work in silos and being able to work together as in collaboration to incorporate project plan initiatives, working together with a community vision in mind. So collaborative efforts is integral.
Yeah. And for leadership, I would print off the priorities and the vision and they would put it in their planner or on their phone so they could access it easily. So they, you know, in housing, these are the top 3 things we'd like to see in housing when they're off to their meetings, you know, advancing or pushing for change and, you know, checking back and forth. You know, communication is so important. Awesome. How are we doing for time now, Tekla?
I think we still have a couple minutes because the whole session was pushed by 5 minutes. So I think we'll get a little notification when we're going to be joined back into the big room. So yeah, feel free to keep answering questions and chatting.
If anybody wants to unmute and share a success story, that would be appreciated, or, you know, if you have any challenges with plan implementation. Any questions in that area?
Good question. Okay, yeah, the plan was too technical, so they rewrote it. More reader friendly, yeah. That's a really wise thing to do. You know, the technical piece is for the technicians. Yeah, and our people. Go ahead, B.
And in community presentations, highlighting key priorities is a good form of, once your community plan is approved, and having it presented in note form, like, you know, just point form of what the key priorities are by department It helps to build understanding of your key community priorities by department, and it establishes, you know, the department's building knowledge and awareness of the key priorities as well. And picking up your handbook and reviewing it every once in a while, and not having it simply sitting on the shelf. So a continuous review of your CCP and your key priorities helps with annual work plan initiatives. You know, when you're putting together your work plan for the year, incorporating your key priorities with your set budgets and possible collaborative efforts with various other departments.
Yeah. I love the idea of the community profile. You know, it's kind of a baseline. So we started our planning in 2011. These are the key features of our community. After 5 years of investment in ECDev, in land use, in training, in those 5 years, we come back and we look at, well, what happened in the population in these areas? And then we can measure it. We can say, oh, well, we have, you know, 80% of our people working ages 18 to 24. That's a success.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big part of the work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And those are forms of measurable results, incorporating your data when you started planning, and the changes and the results at the end of your plan. And incorporating growth plans is very important as well, knowing your population growth and what you would need in the future to meet the needs of your, in the future. So having an understanding of growth plans as well is important.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the slides will be available on the Slack as well, and they probably will be posted up on the community planning. Yeah. And it is hard work to do this, you know, communicating and sharing, and yeah, so take care of yourself through all of that. It's so important to have that balance, because it's hard work to engage and facilitate, because we're giving and we're taking, hey? And so just to notice how much you're giving, and then how and what are you putting back in for yourself. And certainly the community love is a big part of that.